Welcome to the NE Prep Zone After State Tournament podcast. Both Mike and I survived the tourney because we're here.
Yes.
And we're going to give you a little wrap-up of what happened and share a little bit of our wisdom of how we will pick all state teams that we'll have a subsequent podcast to analyze those. But Mike, first of all, kind of your quick takes on what you saw during state on the girls' side.
Obviously, interesting year this year, Stu, with everything kind of mashed together, the girls and the boys tournaments. We'll probably talk about that a little later. A lot of people had thoughts on that. I know it was out of necessity this year, but, props to the NSAA. We got the tournaments played. I thought we had several high-level games. And, starting with the Class A girls, Fremont took home their first title. Kelly Flynn guiding the Tigers to that first title. They defeated Lincoln Southwest in that final, and it was just seemed like the whole town of Fremont was out for that game. And Kelly said it was a journey, and he was probably right, that they took a step every year toward that title, that senior class that finally finished it off and got it done in that final.
It really felt like the old South Sioux City days with Kelly, and Kelly now has enough championship coaches awards. He can panel the den in his new house at the lake at Fremont.
Well, 11 state titles at South Sioux City, number one for Fremont. The only unusual thing was that it was such a low-scoring game, because when we think of Kelly Flynn's teams, we're thinking of teams that are scoring 60, 70, 80 points or more, but Fremont scored just enough to win 37-32.
It was an exciting game. I thought the Class A tourney, obviously the upset of Millard South, that Lincoln Southwest pulled in the semis, was probably one of the shockers of the girls' tourney.
Right. The only undefeated team in the state going into the tournament, Millard South, and they came up a little bit short again. That senior class, they will be a senior class next year. They've got one more year to try to get it done. I'm sure the Patriots, again, will be one of the favorites, preseason favorites next year. Bryce Myers, we'll see if they can finish off that tournament title next year.
You know, it's interesting. It's been a while since a Metro Conference team has won Class A. It's two previous years. It was Alexis Markowski and Lincoln Pius X, and now it's Taylor McCabe and Fremont. Can Millard South or Central or somebody retake the title for the Metro?
Well, Millard South's going to have more players back than Central, so I'd probably look at them, but the Metro Conference hasn't been in that final for a few years, and it's been a little unusual, Fremont being there. And like you said, Pius the last couple of years hasn't been a surprise with Markowski, the very dominating center, who's now putting up big numbers for Nebraska as a freshman. So we'll see if the Metro Conference can break through next year.
Well, on the boys' side with Class A, hats off to Millard North, first back-to-back champions in Class A since the great Central run that ended in 2013. Mustangs finished the season beating Bellevue West 67-57 in the final. David Harmon ended up with 28 points, including the punctuation slam dunk to cap the game. Just a solid 3-year run for Jason Green, who played with the three greats from last year and then left his own mark this year. I thought he was a tremendous leader. This was his team, and he got them to the finish line, and how can you not help but root for Tim Cannon? So all those misses with Brian through the years, and at Millard North, he comes away with the past two titles.
Right. Probably two of the best coaches in the state in that final again, and Doug Woodard and Tim Cannon. And you mentioned Jason Green. I think Creighton fans are really going to like him, because I thought he looked bigger this year to me. He looked like he was, quote unquote, the guy. He realized that since Salas and St. Thomas had moved on. As you mentioned, David Harmon really stepped up, and man, they went through that in the second half against Bellevue West. They just really stepped it up another notch. T-Birds couldn't quite stay with them, but props to Millard North for getting it done. You mentioned Tim Cannon, 2 in a row for him.
Definitely. The final ratings, which come out as we're doing this podcast, 3 through 7 were really hard to assess. I finally went with Westside based on its run through the season. I think if they in prep played 10 10 times in the state tourney. Westside would have a majority of the wins. We followed that with Gretna Prep, Elkhorn South Central, and then a team that you know very well, Omaha Roncalli, our Class B champion, first time since '96, takes 8. Omaha Skutt, which lost 52-37 to the Crimson Pride, is 9th, and then Pius, the last Class A qualifier, is 10th. Class B, we'll stay with boys and then go over to the girls, but Roncalli Skutt 1-2. I put Platteview 3 and Beatrice 4. Those were the semifinalists, and bumped down Scottsbluff and Bennington, which lost in the first round. And other than that, it was kind of status quo. What'd you see in B girls?
Well, Elkhorn North, again, 2 years in a row. They won it last year, their very first season of varsity play. They made it 2 in a row, defeated Omaha Skutt in that final. They were the top 2 teams all year long in Class B. I think that was the final that everybody expected. And, you know, I think if the Skyhawks were going to have a chance in that game, they needed to get off to a really strong start. They weren't able to do that. Elkhorn North took the lead and just kind of held it the rest of the way. Can't mention Elkhorn North without talking about Britt Prince, the very highly decorated and recruited sophomore. She led the way again, and what more can you say? Elkhorn North 2 in a row, and they probably have to loom as the favorite the next 2 years until Britt Prince finally walks down that aisle and gets her diploma.
I tell you, the Britt Prince and Taylor McCabe are 2 of the most exciting players, boys or girls, in the state. I mean, they are fun to watch. Taylor's going on to Iowa. Britt, I think, is going to have her choice of upper tier NCAA contender schools by the time she's done. And
yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. When I was covering them, there wasn't a game where Ann Prince, her mom, parentheses, also the coach, would tell me that some assistant or maybe a head coach from one of the big, quote-unquote, big programs, your Duke and UConn and people like that, were there to at least see her play. So it's no secret that she's one of the top players in the state, and with McCabe's graduation, she'll be the top player heading into next season.
When I like seeing coaches in the stands watching high school games and not just relying on what they see during the summer. I think it's so important they see how top players blend and elevate their supporting cast, because in the summer season, these are all top level kids that you're playing with and against. How do you make your team better? And I like seeing, and I wish some sports would do more of that, seeing how they interact during a game and afterward with their teammates, because I think that certainly foretells success on the next level.
Right. And just using those 2 players you mentioned as an example, McCabe and Britt Prince, they're not one-trick ponies as far as scoring. They assist, steals, defense especially. I think of both of them, that's really underrated, that Britt's got really long arms. She really disrupts things. And McCabe, they usually put her on the other team's, one of their top scorers, and she just did another great job all through the tournament. So,
well, they both go rebound. I mean, on the defensive end, they are crashing. They want to get that ball, and they want to turn and sprint up court. You know, it's not like they're basket hanging on the other end hoping to get the outlet pass. They're the ones getting the ball off the glass and taking off down court, because they are probably faster than the rest of the 8 on the court.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. They're creating out there. You know, they're not just standing up by the 3-point line. They're making things happen, not just for them, but for all their teammates.
Very good passers. You want to talk about the 4 lower classes at state?
Sure. Let's start with C1, and our friends at North Bend made it 3 in a row. The Emanuel sisters kind of always leading the way there. So North Bend defeated Lincoln Lutheran. Game went into overtime. I believe it was Josie Cleveringa who hit the big 3 in overtime to really help the Tigers take the lead. And like we said, North Bend 3 in a row, so very impressive. And I think a couple of those Emanuel sisters are coming back next year, so North Bend will loom as another possible favorite in C1. We'll move on to C2, and Hastings St. Cecilia had a really tough game against Bridgeport. The final there was, I think it was 40-38.
Right.
St. Cecilia. Kissinger St. Cecilia's top player, kind of helped will them to the victory. They kind of went in as the favorite. They were the #1 seed. They were the runner-up to North Bend last year. They blew a big lead in the fourth quarter against North Bend, and I think that loss really drove St. Cecilia this year to that title. Bridgeport did have a chance to tie it late. They weren't able to do it. So
they had a bad turnover there, and
right.
I thought a key factor in that game was just the inspiration that Addie Kierkegaard provided. This senior for them went down with what looked to be a really bad knee injury, had to be helped off the court, iced up, got wrapped at halftime, came back and had 7 rebounds and helped counter the Loomis Godel sisters, Ruthie and Olivia. And I think that may have been one of the differences in a 2-point ball game.
I think that's right. I mean, she got hurt just a couple minutes into the game, so really right off the tip. And when we saw her go down, we thought, well, she's not coming back. They taped up the knee. She was able to come back in the second half. She didn't score a whole lot, Stu, but I think her presence just out there and the fact that she was gutting it out, Kissinger said after the game, just seeing her out there was a big emotional boost for St. Cecilia. So, yeah, props to her for helping that team finish off that state title.
How about D1 and D2?
Well, Humphrey Lindsay Holy Family, a team that I know something about because I was up in Humphrey doing a feature story before the tournament, and Humphrey Lindsay Holy Family got it done, 42-34 over once beaten, now twice beaten Shelton. The Bulldogs really played a nice game. I believe that's their first title since they co-opted with Holy Family.
Which Bulldogs?
That would be Humphrey Lindsay Holy Family. Yeah.
Shelton also is the Bulldogs, so it's a little tough to write, and certainly for a radio broadcaster, you can't use Bulldogs.
True. Yeah, that's always fun when they both have the same nickname. So, but anyway, props to them for finishing it off, and their boys finished it off too.
Yes.
Probably mentioned that. But moving on to D2, Sacred Heart, Falls City Sacred Heart wins by 10 over Humphrey St. Francis. Falls City Sacred Heart finished as the runner-up the previous year to Humphrey St. Francis. And Allison Widener, their very fine All-Stater, who also has gone on to Nebraska. Sacred Heart kind of took the lead. St. Francis got close. Sacred Heart pulled away there at the end. So props again to the Irish for finishing off that Class D2 title.
Luke Sano coaches very well down there. So turning over to the boys' side on our wrap-up of the 4 smallest classes, Ashland Greenwood got done, 27-1. Evan Shepard, one of the classic shots of state tourney lore. It will become a 3-pointer on a kick-out from Cale Jacobson just before the buzzer, 36-33 over 3-time champion Auburn. Again, it was a grinder of a game. Auburn will do that to every single team. And Ashland Greenwood, after being down in the first half, took a 7-point lead, only for Auburn to tie it. And yes, the game would have gone to overtime had that shot not gone in, but Evan Shepard will go down as a hero in the 2 communities forever with that first title. Their one loss was to Roncalli in overtime.
That's saying something. And, you know, props to Jacobson. He had probably at least 3 or 4 Auburn guys all over him. As good a player as he was, he would have really had to force that last shot, and he was unselfish enough, found the open kid in the corner, and the kid buried it. So, like you said, kid's gonna be a legend around Ashland Greenwood forever.
Well, both of them will be. Both faith and trust. That's what they talked about after the game. You mentioned Humphrey Lindsay Holy Family, the boys Bulldogs, just with one loss during the regular season, won their 3rd title with the Schutz brothers, Jason and Jacob, in 4 years. This time it was a 1-pointer over Grand Island Central Catholic, the defending champion. You know, again, another gritty game. Marcus Lowry had a 26-point game for GICC in that one. Not quite enough as the Bulldogs prevailed. In D1, North Platte St. Pat's, first title in 94 years for the Irish since Class D in 1928. They beat Loomis 65-57. One of the better played games the state finals, and hats off to the Irish. It's St. Patty's week after all. And D2, Lincoln Parkview, kind of like Fremont, took the step every year and went to the pinnacle this year. Beat O'Neill St. Mary 64-48 in the final. Parkview also took care of their nemesis, Fall City Sacred Heart, in the semis. So the Patriots are state champions, and that's our rundown. Miller North in A, Roncalli in B, Ashland Greenwood in C1, Humphrey Lindsay Holy Family in C2, North Platte St. Pat's in D1, and Lincoln Parkview in D2. So we got those in the books. Mike's ratings are out on Wednesday, and then we shift to all-state determinations, and probably take this opportunity to kind of explain how we go about selecting our all-state teams. And first of all, we collect, or we send out ballots by email to all coaches in the state, and they are asked to submit players that are first and second team level, and if they're in the Omaha or Metro Conference, then we ask for their first and second teamers in those categories, and then those come back this week, and we take it from there, don't we?
We take it from there, but I think some people think that you pick the boys' team all by yourself, I pick the girls' team all by myself, but we get all those ballots back from coaches, and it's a shared process as far as who our final 5 players are. It's not just you picking the boys and me picking the girls. I mean, we look at coaches' input, we talk, we've covered several games this season, we get input from other sources. It's just it's a process, and it takes a little while, but we try to make sure we're as fair as possible and want the 5 best on that first team. Exactly,
and then the next 5, and with all Nebraska, we're trying to pick the top 15 and try and rate them, and no process is perfect, and sometimes the games we see may have been a career game, it may have been a career low game, so that's why we also, you've got coaches that are watching a lot of huddle, a lot of game film, a lot of scouting, so their input's very important, as it is in football and volleyball and the other team sports that we make all state selections.
Right. It's always kind of interesting when a season ends like basketball and people will say, oh, do you have a week or 2 off? Actually, that transition time between this sport and the sport we cover in the spring, which for me is baseball, that's the busiest time because you're trying to finish up basketball, you're trying to get your preview sheets for baseball. Just kind of a busy time this week and next week, and I believe our all-state team is scheduled to be in a week from this weekend.
March 27th.
Yes.
All Metro would be March 26th then. That's our plan. Yeah, it's a tough turnaround, and in the fall season, at least the girls get a little bit more of a break. This year they really didn't. I'm Ann Prince from Elkhorn North, who really embraces multi-sport athletes, not just basketball players, said, this is kind of, you've now lost 2 weeks of your preparation time, and Britt is a middle distance runner to long distance. She's got a tweaked ankle. There's less time. She'll have to probably miss a week or 2 just to make sure that ankle is good for the rest of the track season, because Elkhorn North is going to be in the thick of that state race too.
Well, I think the girls had it especially tough this year because the district finals were on, I believe, February 25th. And then it was a long time until that first game at state. So I saw, and Elkhorn North was probably one of these teams, they didn't look as smooth as they have during the season, that long layoff. And I know Ann Prince was concerned about that, but the Wolves got better with every game. And I think that was one of the considerations with the girls, that there was such a long time off, because the girls' tournament was the one that got pushed back because of the Big Ten wrestling tournament.
Right. We will not see this format again, at least while I think we're both on the beat. I mean, Nebraska's turn for the Big Ten wrestling comes up in 14 years, maybe longer if they add teams. Right now it's a 14-year cycle. As I wrote in my ratings column this week, I see a 4-day state tourney, boys the week after the girls, and trying to figure out equitable ways that not everybody outside of Class A has to come in on Wednesday and then have a day off. I would like to see Class A play on Wednesday, Class B on Thursday, and then rotate the other 4 classes by gender and by year. I just have a feeling the NSAA is close to doing that, but they're going to survey the schools and go from there. Probably in May they'll make a decision.
Right. I kind of got that feeling too, speaking with NSAA members, coaches, other people that are going to have some input in this. As I said earlier, the NSAA did a great job of getting those tournaments played this year all in 1 week. It was out of necessity. They'll get input from probably all the state tournament teams, ADs, coaches, whatever, and make a decision down the road. But I think, and I'd probably be surprised if it isn't something like you said, maybe 4 days for each tournament.
I think they should survey some players too. As far as, we talked to the Sacred Heart girls after their win, and they like the carnival atmosphere of being down there, not having to go back home. I mean, it's kind of a convention not unlike FFA or FBLA. This is the athletes convention, and they're part of other things to a lot of these kids, and why shouldn't basketball be the same?
Kind of reminds me, I'm trying to remember back in volleyball, it seems like there was an extra day or
that's gone to a 4-day tourney. It
Right.
used to be 2. We
Right.
used to be 2 days and played 2 matches 1 day for the longest time, and finally we got over the resistance to make it 3, and now to get more matches in the big facilities, that now it's a 4-day, and I think that's going to stay.
I remember talking to some of those Scott volleyball girls, and they were like, after they won their first round, they had a day off, and they were like, we're practicing on our day off? What the heck? This is the state tournament. We should be down here just
Watching.
playing our state tournament matches. So it was kind of interesting that it was the day off in between for all the teams this year. That was different. And some coaches liked it. They liked having that extra preparation time, and I think it really helped teams that didn't have a lot of depth, that they weren't playing 3 games in 3 days, that they had that extra day off. But like we said, it was out of necessity this year, so we'll see what the future holds.
And I think also it also gave coaches more time to prepare. So did we see increased defensive intensity or preparedness? I mean, did we see lower scores as a result? It's hard to say, but I think certainly, when you have a Jim Weeks, for instance, you get an extra day to let him scheme and plot. It's not going to be a high-scoring game regardless.
Right. I know some people were saying, well, the players seem to have more stamina because they had that extra day. Anybody who saw the Class A boys final last year would probably debate if we needed
Because those were back-to-back.
Those were back-to-back, and those were such high-level games back-to-back. And, I mean, we had a great Class A boys final this year, too. But, yeah, do they actually need that extra day off? I don't really know if they do or they don't. Hey, they're teenagers, right?
Exactly.
So
they're going to be shooting and working, a walkthrough anyway. So.
right.
But anyway, we've enjoyed the season. We hope you have, and we'll be back once our all-state selections are made, and we'll share some insight on those. So thank you for watching.